Welcome back, everybody, to Post Wrestling, and it's our pleasure to welcome this individual to our show, coming off our review last week of The Dissident. He is an Academy Award-winning director whose latest film, The Dissident, covers the murder of Jamal Khashoggi and goes very, very deep into the case. A pleasure to welcome Bryan Fogel to the program. Bryan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm in Los Angeles. Had a nice weekend, and we've got June gloom here going, which is an interesting thing that everybody thinks LA is sunny, but for the month of June, it's just always just gloom.
We have the opposite. Up here in Canada, everyone assumes that we're in igloos and it's cold all the time, when it's actually, I'm sure, more similarities than differences between Toronto and Los Angeles.
Yeah, well, hopefully it'll pass soon, but it's anyway, doing well.
Well, I wanted to start off this by tying in one of the very first quotes that we hear from your previous film of Icarus, and that's when you hear Lance Armstrong saying, "Extraordinary allegations must be followed up by extraordinary proof." And the Jamal Khashoggi case, this film, The Dissident, very much is that extraordinary proof. But what is so fascinating is when you inject politics at the very highest level and that power that comes with it, that kind of throws a major curveball into that pretty simple extraordinary allegations being met with extraordinary proof doesn't always give you the fair justice that it should accompany.
Well, I think, what's interesting about, the two films, both Icarus and The Dissident, is exactly that, where there's this incredible, overwhelming, substantiated, undeniable, irrefutable truth behind Russia's state-sponsored doping scandal and program, which took place over decades. Or in the case of The Dissident, the murder of Jamal Khashoggi that was ordered by, the Crown Prince himself. And yet, despite this truth, both of these crimes are able to be gotten away with essentially without punishment or any sort of ramifications.
So in starting, the project here, you had just won the Academy Award for Icarus. And I guess I'm curious to know, would you have felt confident enough to tackle something as big as this topic if you had not had the success of Icarus?
I think it goes more to the question of, could have I tackled this topic had Icarus not happened, and arguably the success of Icarus, and I think that answer is no. It was October 2018 when the world became aware of Jamal Khashoggi's murder over those 2 weeks, and every media outlet, every news outlet, arguably in the world, was covering the story. Journalists from all over the world were converging on Istanbul. And the ability for me to be able to embark on this journey, as I saw it, was to gain access and exclusive access to Jamal's fiancée, Hetice Cengiz, Omar Abdulaziz in Canada, who I viewed as the protagonist of the story, and the Turkish government, and to build their trust. And as so many others were, I think, probably in pursuit of this story as well, I think the work that we had done on Icarus and protecting Gregory Rodchenkov, how the film came together, and ultimately the accolades allowed me access that I don't think, even a year prior, I could have ever achieved or received, under the circumstances.
Where is Bryan Fogel in in your life and your career in October of 2018, and this story maybe changing whatever your future projects were lining up to be at the time. Take us back to kind of where you are when this whole thing is unfolding.
It's a very interesting question, and one that I haven't been asked before. I'd come off of winning the Oscar in March of 2018, and that was, such a surreal experience. It was largely all positive, but coming into that, there was a tremendous amount of pressure because the campaign for that had been going for months, and I'd been traveling nonstop, and the stakes behind it, which was, at the time Russia had not been banned. There were real world stakes, and Gregory Rodchenkov, a scientist, is in this to this day, still living in hiding and under protection, and so that has not changed. And so coming out of that that kind of whirlwind that was in Icarus, March of 2018, I had no bandwidth to really consider other projects. And then, that journey is essentially over. And now my bandwidth is open to consider other projects. And all these things are coming at me, from, scripted features to taking a meeting at Disney to you name it. And nothing that was coming at me was resonating or checking the boxes that I was looking for, at least in my mind, for what that next project was going to be, what that next film was going to be. And I felt pressure. I mean, I felt kind of like a burden and an obligation that, okay, whatever the next thing I do has got to somehow, be in that kind of realm of investigative journalism. Needs to be a thriller. It needs to have real world implications. I don't want to tell an archival story. I want to go on a journey. I want to, uncover and unravel things. And, I hadn't found anything. And here this, Jamal's murder, tragically is unfolding on the pages of the newspapers and CNN and BBC and what have you on a daily basis. And my ears perk up and I go, okay, this could be it. This might be it. Because it was checking those boxes that I was interested in. The story of human rights, a story of free speech, freedom of press, a journalist who had been murdered at his own country's consulate, a grieving widow, a dissident protagonist, living in fear of his life in Montreal for tweeting, all these elements that come forward in the film. And I said, okay, this could be the next one. And, when you set out on a journey like this, I go into a mindset of, I have no idea how long this is going to take. I don't know if this is going to be, take me a year. Is this going to take me 2 years? Icarus had taken me 3.5 years. So, when you're taking on a project, like, I'm really mindful of not knowing where that's gonna, how long it's gonna take and where that's gonna go. But at that time, I was really trying to figure out what it was, and I didn't know whether or not I was going to be able to truly make the film until about 4 months later. I set out middle of October to try to gain access, but it wasn't until Hetice Cengiz finally agreed to be a part of this, which is the first scene that you see of her in the film, which was when she went to speak in front of the European Parliament in the beginning of February 2019, that I knew that I could actually make the film. And so that journey was October, November, December, January, 3.5 months of basically just, nose to the grindstone. I was in Istanbul, I was in Montreal, building trust with Hetice, building trust with Omar, building trust with the Turks, that I felt like, okay, I can now actually begin making the film.
That process in and of itself of building trust before you even, bring cameras into the whole thing, seems like such a important part of the documentation process that, never really kind of gets seen by the audience. Can you maybe describe a little bit more about how you managed to just let these people feel comfortable to be a part of this?
Well, I think for me and also my creative team, the way that I'm approaching working with someone is, I think there's different styles, and you can't say one's right, one's wrong. There are filmmakers who go, okay, I'm just going to be a fly on the wall, and my camera's going to be there, and whatever happens is going to happen. And yes, I do that to a larger extent in a lot of ways. But when approaching a story like this, you're not only dealing with real lives, so it's not like you're going in retrospect and making a movie, I don't know, about, what happened during the Obama years, or you're making a movie, about Prince, or somebody who's no longer here. While Jamal was gone, there's real, world implications and tentacles, and the people deeply affected by his murder were alive, and that's who I was seeking to work with. And so, I approached Hetice and Omar and the Turks, going, look, I'm not here to shoot for a day or shoot for a week or to do an interview with you and leave. If we go and do this, I'm here to go on a journey with you, and I'm going to be by your side all through this process. And when the film comes together, I'm going to show you this film before I complete it, and make sure that you're okay with it, because it's really important to me that you're proud of this film, and that you're proud of the work we've done, and that you trust me. And that I haven't done anything to upset you. And because I wasn't out there going to, like, let's say, make the Jinx, where you're trying, where what happened and catching, Robert Durst and and it turns out that he's a murderer. That's not what this story was. It was, this. I knew that Omar and Hetice going in, I had great compassion for them. And so it was just taking time, and that trust building was months and months and over a year-long process. I mean, the Turks finally gave me the transcript to his murder, which they still haven't released to CNN or BBC or any organization, but it's in the film, and that took a year. And there were probably 60, 70 meetings I had. I wasn't filming. I was just meeting officials within the Turkish government, building their trust, that they knew that I could be trusted. For every day that I would shoot with Hetice, we would hang out for days. We'd go to lunches, we'd go to dinners. We'd we were on like a very emotional journey together, and same with Omar. And I think that trust that was built, that they understood that I was not just there to film with them, I was going to protect them, I think allowed for what you see in the film. And that was the same case with Icarus.
It's such a concrete case that you present in the documentary, and I'm struck watching it at the certain level of brazenness of the government to believe that we can carry this out. There will be so much evidence, and when you're weighing the political calculus of this, when MBS is just a few months removed from this tour of essentially being the new face of Saudi Arabia, it just seemed like this is as much a story of this belief that we are above the law. And, the fallout, gives a lot of credence to that ability of how far they feel they could get away with something that is done in a pretty transparent fashion that you outline throughout the documentary.
Yeah, look, I don't think, that the Saudis ever believed for a minute that they were going to get caught. So unlike, let's say, the poisoning of Alexei Navalny with Novichok and in Germany, or the murder of Alexander Litvinenko with polonium in 2006, where Putin is leaving his fingerprints on things, where he's going, yeah, I didn't do it, but you go, well, how else could this happen? There's no other way. Who's getting access to Russian nerve agents unless this was a state-ordered hit? Where Putin is wanting, essentially his people or those who betray him to know that this is what's going to happen, and he doesn't care. I think with MBS. Ultimately, he was able to get away with it because of the money, because of the power that Saudi holds and on the world stage, and investments, and all the stuff that we faced, and the struggle even to get distribution for the film. Mm-hmm. But in the planning of the murder, which was botched, obviously, they never could have imagined that there was a listening device inside the consulate. I don't think they could have foreseen the piecing together of the extraordinary job Turkish intelligence did with all the closed caption, all the video surveillance cameras all over the city, that they were able to piece that together from the airports to the, their investigation was incredible. And clearly they intended to make Jamal vanish. And they certainly were not believing that they were going to be caught.
Certainly, one of the big parts of this story is just like the incredible amount of evidence that you were able to gather and present in this entire thing. And obviously, well, to me, the most chilling of which was when, in the film, you finally did present that transcript that you were just describing. And I found it incredibly chilling, the fact that we were simply hearing this person read out the transcript as we got to see the text on screen, rather than, let's say maybe hearing the audio itself, or, seeing photos, using photos to illustrate, I suppose, or a reenactment of some sort to illustrate the transcript. Obviously you're limited with what evidence you're given, but like, what was the creative decision process behind just simply showing the words for, arguably the most chilling scene of the movie?
Well, that scene, was actually a pretty very, very in-depth, graphics, sound, also how we were bringing the words to life, and how we chose to construct that scene between Irfan Fidas, the chief prosecutor, Agnes Calamard, and then using the actual transcript, but turning the transcript almost into a living, breathing character, and then using the sound design that was going on behind that, the lighting effects that we were doing through that sequence of lighting and visualization, and kind of like this feeling of like being in a room, and the music. We had been offered at that point the audio of Jamal's murder, which still has been unreleased, but Turkey had offered it. And they offered it because they said, okay, this film will be the be all end all of this story. And if they were ever going to release the audio, it would be here and now. And so I had the transcript, and I had Agnes Calamard who would listen to the audio, and Irfan. And I thought that it would just be gratuitous for an audience to have to listen to this man's horrendous murder, and for those who loved him to have to listen to this, for Hetice and Omar and his family and his friends. And, and it felt like it went to a place too far that the audience didn't need. So instead we took these words of what happened, the actual transcript, which, nobody had. And and brought it to life in the manner that you see presented in the film, which I hope is incredibly effective and chilling, without taking that extra step, which felt that it was going into I don't know, like a snuff film or something. It didn't need it, and there's so much shock in what was there already, and it also felt more powerful to see the words, in English or translated on your screen, of what really went on, and kind of the barbarianism of his murder.
That's completely fascinating. The thought process going into that, as you are kind of weaving through this story, it does become like a pretty important theme of the role that tech plays in this, and especially, I think, scaring a lot of people about the amount of monitoring through this program called Pegasus. And I'm sure you're thinking, Bryan, like there is probably a separate documentary on just that aspect of things. Can you tell me a little bit about that balancing process? Because that's like a very different chilling part of the film, but chilling nonetheless about the level of monitoring that is going on through this program.
Well, what you're talking about, John, is basically this, Israeli cyber hacking software called Pegasus. There are other competitors to Pegasus. There's probably 3 or 4 or 5 products on the market that are not available to consumers. They're basically available to governments that can afford this technology, but it's being sold by private companies. And in this case, NSA out of Israel developed Pegasus, and they only sell to governments, but they'll basically sell to any government. And because what's happening is Israel is gaining insight into its allies and enemies when they sell this software, because to have this kind of technology, they're controlling the back end of it. So when they license it, right, it's just like, okay, you buy a license from Adobe, right? Well, Adobe can turn off your monthly subscription. They know when you're using the Adobe product, they know, right? Or you're buying your Microsoft Office, or how all these programs are working now, right? That are basically a license. That, hey, you don't pay your Spotify, they shut it off, but also Spotify knows exactly what you're listening to, right? Well, the same thing is happening in the case of Pegasus, except this is being sold to governments. So the scary part about this is that, okay, so the government of Israel, who has to authorize the sale, is gaining intelligence into who Saudi Arabia wants to hack, or who the United States wants to hack, or who anybody who they're selling this software to is hacking and wants to hack, which is an incredible, intelligence tool. On the other hand, these tools are being used in many cases for nefarious purposes. And what you see in the film is that, the weaponry behind Pegasus, which is, it creates an open box to your phone, that anything and everything that's running on your phone, regardless of how secure you might think it is, once they get in, they have full access to your phone, like it's in the palm of their hands. And in the wrong hands can be very dangerous. And there's been multiple murders tied to the use of Pegasus in other countries. Other governments that have went after dissidents, or went after rebel groups, or went after journalists, you name it. And there is really no as I see it, way to kind of stop this, because if you have the money to obtain this, or you're a government that wants to obtain this, there are companies that will sell this technology to you.
The revelation that Omar's phone was hacked, and him believing that is, one of the reasons, at least, that led to Jamal's killing was, one of the big revelations of this film. I'm curious to know what the reaction from the world has been towards that bit of information, and also Hetice, maybe learning about something like that.
Well, I guess when you think of, or you say the world in a broad context, or information, I think what we constantly see, and this goes way beyond this, is that despite what you think should be done, or what is the right thing to do, or whatever, really, in reality, doesn't happen. So okay, so Omar's phone had been hacked. He knows it's been hacked. Now the Canadian government has been protecting Omar, and they've done a good job. I mean, we're a couple of years on, and Omar is alive. He's continuing his work. He's being monitored. He's living under, kind of limited mobility, but Canada granted him asylum, and so those things, I think happened, or largely were expedited as a result of not only this hack, but the threat assessment that was going on. In terms of punishment, or in terms of like, has NSO, the company that sold Pegasus, they're being sued, but is anything ever really going to happen from that? It's unlikely. Are they going to be able to stop selling licenses? It's unlikely. Is there going to be all sorts of government regulations on this sort of technology? It's unlikely, because it's just too hard to monitor. And this is the same thing that you're seeing across all these social media platforms. Like, if you're looking like at the film and you go, okay, wait, so they hacked into Twitter, and that's there's a lawsuit. These Saudi agents were had figured out, were working for Twitter and basically hacking people's accounts on Twitter. But you go, okay, well, can that happen again? Of course. Or if you look at like how Twitter works, which is like the bees and flies, which is the same thing that makes Twitter a vehicle for freedom of speech, meaning, okay, you can be in Burma, and you can create a Twitter account using a VPN under any name you want, under any right, and you can create 100 of those accounts. Well, that same power for free speech, right, is also the same power that creates proliferation of false information, or creates QAnon, or conspiracy theories, and so it's this double-edged sword. And that's what you see in the film with the bees and the flies, because ultimately Omar's bees were functioning the same way that the Saudi flies were functioning, which was creating lots of fake Twitter accounts, except in Omar's case, they're creating the accounts to send out good messaging and let the people, know that what's going on to them. And in the Saudis' account, they're creating all the fake Twitter accounts to basically, send out propaganda and pro-government and pro-MBS messaging, or messaging to conceal the murder of Jamal, et cetera. And so, when you say this is, what happened, I mean, I think this is the bigger, conversations of how does this function, and how does this regulation function? And the more things are regulated, they become free. I mean, cryptocurrency is facing this same kind of zeitgeist moment right now. This is really great. And then, okay, the governments are going to regulate it. And then what is it, what now it's lost what has made it, great. And I think this is this constant kind of struggle that we're in this age of technology, in a global landscape where everything is truly global at this point.
I know that when the documentary was released, you've obviously done a lot of press, and one of the big topics has been the struggle to find distribution for this particular project, and I think that's concerning to a lot of people on just the front of the side of how much that is going to limit aspiring filmmakers of even wanting to tackle such a topic if the belief is that at best this is going to be a passion project. Like, can you tell us a little bit about just, is it almost impossible for a documentary to be successful if you don't have one of the streaming giants behind it in a big way? Like, is there a roadmap to success, and has it evolved at all in these last couple of months for you and getting The Dissident out to people?
Well, look, it's available. I mean, you can go on Apple. I realize they just did a promotion right now. It's 99 cents on Apple, Amazon. Meaning it's available for rent. Mm-hmm. It's just not on the streaming platforms, meaning it's not part of your Netflix subscription. It's not part of your Amazon Prime subscription. It's not on your Hulu or your HBO or your Paramount Plus or your Disney, or, which is how people digest content these days. The vast majority of people are not looking to rent a film, because the mindset is that any film they need to see or any show they need to see will be on their Netflix, their HBO, their Amazon, their Hulu, right? And so not having that, and certainly not having, let's say, the power of a Netflix, which, with Icarus, it's incredible, because the day that Netflix launched Icarus, it was in 190 countries simultaneously at the same time, translated across whatever it is, 50 some odd languages. And the world had access to that film. And it had a huge impact, because when Icarus came out, Russia was not banned from the Olympics. 5 months later, they were. And that was the impact, this global impact of the film. And to this day, 3 years on, I find it hard to find anyone, anywhere I go in the world, that hasn't seen that film. Or if they haven't seen it, they've heard of it, and then they see it. And, that is the incredible power of a platform like a Netflix or an Amazon, but, really Netflix, and, of releasing and distributing content on a global level. So, very, very disappointing that a film like this, that I believe that, planet Earth, would like to see, and that people would see in much, much bigger numbers if they didn't have to search for it, to rent it. And it's also still, The Dissident is also still not available in tons and tons of countries all over the world, because the way it was now distributed was, distributor by distributor, country by country, and available for rent. So, I think that we are in an environment now, with the globalization of these companies, that it is becoming harder and harder to have content like this, reach a global marketplace, because the considerations, and I can understand it on their side too, the considerations, what used to be of, okay, we're releasing a film in the United States or this and that, is now about, okay, if we release this film globally, will we create enemies in Egypt? Will they maybe try to hack our platform? Will they launch a Twitter war against us? Will that thwart our growth in the United Arab Emirates? Will that hurt? Will that upset, what percentage of our subscribers in the Middle East? Will it create, and so all of these considerations are now coming into content distribution that I don't think were there a few years ago. And I think it is becoming increasingly difficult to have films that speak truth to power, or, to make a film like this and believe that if the film is extraordinary, the film's incredible, or the film is applauded or accoladed, that it's going to find global distribution. That is not, the recipe anymore. Where I think in the past, if you created something that, you knew people wanted to see and was really, really well put together, et cetera, that there would be a path for that. And I don't see that path anymore.
It's rather unfortunate because, I mean, I feel like, with the digital age, so much of it feels like it's a freeing of some of those shackles that, like, traditional models of distribution may have created. But it seems like there's a bit of a sort of full circle taking us back to some of those limitations. Obviously, I'm sure you would love it if this film would be able to receive some of the same accolades as your prior film Icarus, and I have to imagine, if it did receive some of the same acclaim when it comes time for award season, more people.
Well, no, the award season's over.
Okay, really.
The film was not, the Academy. It was not recognized by the Academy, but it didn't have the the platform and the push behind it, which makes it hard. It was nominated for the British Academy Award, which was great, a BAFTA, and the film won, myself and Mark Monroe won the Writers Guild Award for Best Documentary Screenplay, won a bunch of other stuff, but it despite the reviews, and I think the lack of a global distributor certainly hurt the film for the major awards. But nominated for British Academy Award was wonderful, and winning the WGA award was wonderful.
Entering topics such as this, or the topics that you have in Icarus, I mean, I imagine you're entering these projects with an intense amount of fearlessness, but as a result, have you taken steps to protect yourself in the ensuing months?
I'm always asked that, and I do the best I can. On the other hand, I don't really go into that mindset. I stay focused more on the work. One of my favorite docs, Free Solo, there's that scene with Alex Honnold, the guy who climbed El Capitan without ropes, and he goes, "Well, I went into a lab and they tested my brain and they said there's something off in my amygdala, basically what's going on in my brain of fear. I don't know if I have something off with me. I just think that I stay focused on the larger story, and I go, wow, Omar is struggling, Hetice is struggling. There's so many tens of thousands of people in the world, millions, hundreds of millions of people in the world that don't have the freedom that I have to even embark on something like this, or don't live in countries, or don't live under governments that they could even fathom doing work like this. And so I view it from more of a place of being grateful that not only am I given the ability to do this, that I'm free to do this work, rather than try to think about fear, because I think fear doesn't really serve any purposes. And if I was operating from that premise, I don't think I would be embarking on the work I did in Icarus or in the Dissident for that matter.
We'll end it with this, Bryan, and thank you very much for all of this time. And I'll apologize if this is maybe too philosophical on my behalf, but when you look at the end story and the legacy of Jamal and this story and those that have not been accountable at the top end, I mean, is there a parallel here of that in the story of the life of Jamal Khashoggi, that he is the Icarus figure that flew too close to the sun? And that's a pretty sobering statement to make. But at the end of it, like, that is the conclusion that I think some will come to in all of this, that there is not going to be the proper amount of justice, even in a case, as we mentioned, had these extraordinary allegations and extraordinary proof.
Look, there is 100% never. I just don't see it going to be justice in regards to this murder. I mean, MBS is not going to be arrested. There isn't going to be an Interpol arrest warrant. They aren't going to pick up the kill team. These guys in Saudi Arabia are going to get away with it, and they have gotten away with it for over 2 years now. I mean, the money, the influence, the investment, all that stuff is going to allow that. On the other hand, I think his murder opened up the world's eyes to what is going on in that country, opened up the world's eyes to the repression against freedom of speech and freedom of press and freedom of journalism, and the struggle that is going on there, despite the glossy projection of that government of, hey, look how great it is in Saudi Arabia, and come here and be a tourist and come and and invest in our country. And I think that Jamal's murder will forever be a stain on Mohammed bin Salman's legacy. And I think that people who do business with him will always know in the back of the head who they are doing business with. And but in terms of punishment, I don't think there really ever will be meaningful punishment. But you can look at the same thing in Putin's Russia. Ultimately, if you got that kind of money, right, or those kind of business interests, or nuclear weapons, right, meaningful punishment becomes very difficult. Now, if this had been the government of Rwanda that had done this crime, I think you would have seen very different actions, because the financial stake and the business stakes would have allowed the UN to sanction them, would have allowed the United States. It became different. But here, even in Biden and releasing the U.S. intelligence findings into the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, which says that Mohammed bin Salman ordered the murder, he released the findings and then said, yes, and we're not going to do anything about it. It's the sad reality of the world that we're living in. And I think a reminder to all of us that these things can happen. They do happen. They'll continue to happen. And I think just our internet day and age surveillance, what's going on, is just making us more as a planet aware of these sorts of crimes. Whereas I think before, so many of these were able to be pushed under the rug.
The film is The Dissident. You can find this at places that Bryan has mentioned. It is out there. Thedissident.com is where you can find additional information. And it's a very important documentary that I would recommend people that are even casually familiar with the story. This will provide you with an extensive look at the entire case. And congratulations on the documentary, Bryan. I want to thank you very much for joining us to chat about the documentary and really some fantastic insight into the whole process behind it.
My pleasure, guys. Be well, and thanks for having me on.